Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. Last Sunday marked the 15th anniversary of China's entry into the World Trade Organization, a day on which China had expected to start officially being treated as a market economy. But many prominent WTO members, including the US, Japan, and some European countries, say they will refuse to grant China this status. The Ministry of Commerce in China said China will take the necessary measures to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests according to WTO rules. So how should we evaluate those members' reluctance to recognize China as a market economy? What should China do to protect its own WTO rights? And is the WTO's influence being undermined in the context of a free trade agreement? To discuss these issues and more, today I'm happy to be joined in the studio by He Wei-wen, Senior Fellow at the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies, Renmin University, and Claire Pearson, Chair of the British Chamber of Commerce in China. But before we begin our discussion, let's take a look at this.
Last Sunday marked the 15th anniversary of China's entry into the World Trade Organization. As China celebrates the occasion, the issue of whether China is considered as a market economy has again been put into the spotlight. The US, Japan and other European countries are saying that they refuse to grant China market economy status. China says it spent the past 15 years implementing reforms, including lowering tariffs, which by 2010 had been nearly cut in half. What's more, at least 80 countries in the WTO have already awarded China market economy status. In light of this, the WTO itself has responded that China has become an important and indispensable part of the world economy. It added that China has fulfilled its promises to the organization. WTO spokesperson Keith Rockwell said that China has already become one of the biggest defenders of the WTO and of open economies. At the same time, WTO Deputy Director General Yi Xiaojun also called for a right diagnosis.
We would encourage our members that they should have a right diagnosis, because wrong diagnosis may lead to wrong medicine. The protectionism is a wrong medicine. It will not create any job.
Beijing is now urging its fellow WTO members to stop using the surrogate country approach against Chinese exports, or, in other words, to stop using prices in a third country as a benchmark to calculate the normal value of exports from China. This was a clause China agreed to when it joined the WTO 15 years ago, but it expired on Sunday and China is demanding that countries abide by the agreement. The Ministry of Commerce said China will take the necessary measures to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests according to WTO rules.
Welcome to Dialogue. It's been 15 years since China's entry into the World Trade Organization. Do you think China has fulfilled its commitment to this organization?
Yes, I think so. Generally speaking, China has fulfilled as scheduled all its commitments at the point of accession. For instance, first, in terms of tariff rates, we have reduced our tariff rate from over 30% to 9% on average as scheduled, and also have abolished most of the non-tariff barriers. Also, we have restreamed our regulations and laws and regulations and scrapped all those not in compliance of WTO rules. We have scrapped nearly 2,000 pieces of laws and regulations at the central level, and also nearly 200,000 pieces at the local levels. So we say that China has fulfilled its commitments. And 10 years ago, the WTO Director General, Pascal Lamy, or WTO Elephant, rated China as the performance as A+.
Do you agree?
About
with some
70%,
reservations.
some reservations. I feel at the moment China has made massive efforts, particularly in the area of the reform of state-owned enterprise. I'd say that China is absolutely 60 to 70% market economy. I think massive effort has been made to comply with the terms of WTO. And I think at the moment what's happening is there's misunderstanding between the countries who are not exceeding China's full membership of WTO. I think what's happening is they really don't understand the Chinese economy so well. I think there needs to be increased dialogue between the people who are refusing to give China market status and the Chinese economists.
This year, 2016, was full of black swans, and one of them is, of course, the Brexit. Now, do you believe the UK shares the same perception about China's economic status with the European Union?
I think the golden relationship between China and the UK continues. I think the relationship with Europe is strained, but I think that China and the UK have complementary economies. And I think there's never been a better time for us to engage in business, to engage politically, to engage in people-to-people dialogue. So I think the UK is a strong supporter of the reform in the Chinese economy.
But are you a strong supporter of China's market economic status? The European Union says no, the United States says no, Japan says no, but what about the UK?
Well, Ray, this is what I really like about your programme. You're very good at putting me on the spot.
Please give me a direct answer, bluntly.
Bluntly,
yes.
As somebody who has sat in China for 12 years, I find it the most capitalist free market economy I have ever worked in. Europe looks relatively socialist. China really is a free market society. I was just reading the book at lunch today by Wang Lengjing, the CEO of Wanda. 1992, Deng Xiaoping does his tour of the South. We're going to open up. Wang Lengjing sees an opportunity and starts building shopping centres. He's built 8. He goes to the VP of Walmart and said, "Will you come in my shopping centre?" And the VP of Business Development in Walmart goes, No, who are you? Who are you? It takes him 5 years to convince Walmart to locate in one of his shopping centres in the south of China. Roll on 10 years, roll on 2005. Who do you think's writing the rules for Walmart about relocating in a Wanda shopping centre? In a way, the rules are being written now by the Chinese economists, but 2008 might have been an economic revolution, but the political revolution of who writes the rule book of who it is and is not a market economy has not really caught up with the global economic reality.
Our distinguished British lady drew a difference, a line of demarcation between politics and economics with regard to who writes the rules. President Obama, of course, says it's the United States that writes the rules. Now, do you think basically China has been able, since 15 years ago, to comply with most of the world rules so that we would not be viewed as a maverick in the framework of the WTO?
Yes, I think we have made great progress over the past 15 years. We started learning.
What about our subsidies for the SOE?
Oh, yes.
From the very beginning, in her strong understatement, our British colleague said, well, that could be a problem, the SOE.
I think in a sense, this is a problem. So because we are pushing forward energetically the reforms of SOEs. If all the problems are solved, what's the need to continue our reform of SOEs? So one of the problems of SOEs is monopoly. They have the monopoly to some sectors and the markets, while others cannot move in on an equal basis. And also they have some additional, I believe, as subsidies. So that must be changed. Otherwise we say, well, everything is done. Nothing needs to be done. That's wrong. We still have room for improvement.
The current focus of complaints and grievances from our European friends, American partners, and from Japan has been the so-called Surrogate Country Approach.
Yes.
Now, that has a lot to do with their anti-dumping investigation into Chinese exports.
Yes.
What's wrong with that? Is it important for parties in the dispute to turn to the dispute settlement mechanism instead of dismissing the 15-year grace period? Because it's stipulated and laid out clearly in the protocol about China's accession to
Yes.
the market economy that by the time the grace period reaches the end of the date of expiry, China automatically becomes the market economy. But why do they still use the surrogate country approach instead of the dispute mechanism?
I think the surrogate country methodology is different from market status, market economy status. There are two different issues. We say that in the Protocol 15, Article 15, the clause goes like that. It refers to the price compatibility when in subsidies and dumping, and not referring to the macroeconomy as a whole. They say if in the case when the anti-dumping or anti-subsidy case and countervailing case rises, then we judge. If the Chinese company in investigation can prove that the market conditions prevail in the manufacture, production, and sale of the product, then its costs and prices should be adopted as the basis for computing. If not, then they can use the WTO member related, could use another methodology or not based on a strict comparison of prices and costs in China. In that case, that means this methodology or surrogate country methodology shall expire 15 years after the date of the accession. So that means surrogate country methodology can no longer use after 15 years, no matter you recognize China as a market economy or not.
The Chinese officials have made it very clear that we would turn to the dispute settlement mechanism for a solution. China vows to take legal actions to safeguard our own legitimate rights. Are you a fan of this legal action? Do you foresee a trade war between those claimants, those parties concerned?
I mean, to be honest, Ray, I think I'm not against taking legal action. You have to start somewhere. I think what really is going on here, despite the minutiae of the rules, we have to look where WTO comes from. I mean, it is really born out of the Bretton Woods Agreement. I mean, that was really an agreement between America and the UK on how to solve the UK's debt issue post-war. But in reality today, there's a lot of electoral skepticism about globalization in the West, just at a time when China is going global like never before. So I think what we really need to do is, yes, take your legal action, because I think the problem for WTO, it's beginning to look global but anachronistic in some regards in terms of its management structure. I think who hosted the original meeting at Bretton Woods in the US, and who wrote the original rule book, that matters. I think there needs to be a real look at where WTO comes from. I mean, in the old days, you used to be married or not married. You used to be socialist or capitalist. But today, I think there's a lot of permutations and combinations in between. And I think that it's not a case of whether you're legal or illegal. It's a case of whether your country is tackling the issues that matter to most of the people in the world. Most of the people in the world are Asian or African, 60%. China is running AIIB and the Belt and Road Project to create infrastructure to enable these people to be part of the global economy. And if WTO prevents them from doing this, prevents them from being part of a level playing field in the global economy, I think China may have to start by using the legal tools that the West recognizes to fight, as you say, an economic war. And you have to use sort of Western methods to win China's rights.
Claire raised some fundamental questions concerning the origin of WTO, or World Trade Organization, which was previously called GATT.
Yes.
They are the products of what was drafted in the wake of the Second World War, the Bretton Woods system. But with the separation of dollar from gold in the early 1970s, many who are skeptical about the world influence of the United States said the United States should no longer use dollar as the sole reserve currency globally. Having said this, do you think behind and below the use of surrogate country approach is actually the global trend of anti-globalization, the rise of populism? They no longer trust the multilateral regime, because every time when we had the multilateral negotiations outside, there would always be massive protests who protest against the globalization, saying they have become victims of job outsourcing one kind or another.
I think yes. If we review the facts, we say yes. Really, it's happening. Nearly 20 years ago, in 1999, when WTO Ministerial Conference took place in Seattle, I was positioned in San Francisco in the Consul General, and also I'm a member of the China delegation. And before the conference, we were informed that the Alpha Seal would launch a 50,000 people demonstration at the conference, and it did happen. So we had a curfew later. So that means there's a strong protest. Not to say that, not to mention Donald Trump today, but it's only nearly 20 years ago we saw that in the States. So how can we apprehend that matter? We say that globalization, of course, creates larger markets, creates growth. On the other hand, because of the movement of the capital, it usually pushes the technology advances and improve our productivity. So they tend to displace jobs. So this is some problems, and also disparity of incomes. So we have to solve them with social policies, with job policies for supplement, not to blame globalization only. Otherwise, you cannot move on. And globalization, I think, rests on the economic law because of the division of work, because of the mass production worldwide. You have to cross the border. You cannot confine the production process in the country, within the border. So we have to tackle that carefully and handle them in the right way.
Thank you very much. You are watching Dialogue with Mr. He Weiwen, Senior Fellow at the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies, Renmin University of China, and Claire Pearson, Chair of the British Chamber of Commerce in China. We're discussing why China has been denied the full-fledged market economic status by Europeans and Americans and our immediate neighbor of Japan. We'll come back after this short break and examine why. So stay with us, please. Welcome back. What measures are likely to be taken by the Chinese authorities to fight trade protectionism? We've been talking about the legal battles that will erupt.
Not only surrogate country methodology, in general. I think first of all, we have to consult with the SET members. If a dispute arises between more than two countries, we have to consult with them through government channel, do a good job, try to have more dialogue, to explain more, provide more information, explanation, try to have a better mutual understanding so as to find the real issue of the problem. It will fail in consultation, that will resort to WTO, and we will depend on WTO, thinking that WTO will give a right answer and ruling based on the rules. If WTO rules come out and the other countries refuse to follow, then we'll take another additional measures. We will measure what cost or what loss we have incurred. Then we will try to do the same to the party, that you must bear the same cost, same loss. Otherwise, it's unfair.
Will there be more anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigations against China as a result of their refusal to accept China as a full-fledged market economic status from the European perspective, Claire?
Right, I'm sure there will be. There's a period of relative economic recession coming to Europe at the moment. So individual governments are very worried about protecting local jobs. There's a rise in parochial protectionist politics. It's a fact. So people are, I mean, they're only voted in by their home nation, so they're dependent on winning the votes. I think what needs to be done is a real education piece by China. Exactly what you said. There needs to be more dialogue.
Education for our Europeans, we lecture them about what's right, what's wrong, or self-education for the Chinese nationals, because you know, some of them may not have developed good and sound legal awareness about the litigation or how to comply with the local laws.
It's a bit of both, Ray. I mean, to be honest, I don't think Brussels is the best place to learn how to run the world. I mean, it was a good place to learn how to run the world in the past, but for the future looks very different. And I think that people from Europe need to spend more time here to see what's happening. How do you build a railway from Ethiopia to Djibouti? How do you build these sorts of projects without some government intervention? You need the government working with business to complete some of the major infrastructure projects that are going to facilitate a more equal form of globalization. Because what's happening, well, the reason we have these anti-dumping fights is because people aren't seeing the upside of globalization, they're only seeing the downside. We need a more equitable form of globalization. And if China can say that it's part of the solution, not part of the problem, then I think it will get the support that it needs from WTO. Because what I was just looking at AIIB logo the other day, AIIB with circled bottom top. It's like a railway across the globe. But if you turn it sideways, it's also an equals. So it's creating equal opportunity through infrastructure projects like China to Laos or the road through Pakistan. Who is bringing those people into the global economy? These are often the losers in globalization. I know people like me without a car but with a bike really like trains because we can go all over the continent of China for about 50 quid. Now, if China brings that economic opportunity through infrastructure projects, I don't think we care if it's a black cat or a white cat that's building the railway that brings us into the global economy.
The reluctance by Europeans and Americans to give us the market economic status has dealt a severe debilitating blow to employment in many sectors of the Chinese economy. Taking the iron and steel industry as an example, Europeans have long complained that we export too much of our overcapacity in the area of steel production to their countries, so that our excessive dumping, quote-unquote, of steel products may have caused massive protests from those who are very protective about their own homegrown jobs and industries. So what do you think of our review about our own behavior? Claire mentioned over and over the importance of AIIB and our corresponding investment in the infrastructure building in developing countries. But what about our European partners? They don't want the export surplus of our overcapacity.
I cannot tell exactly the story about Europe, but more or less on America. Would that be okay?
No problem.
Just for an instance.
No problem, because we have a Trump.
First on China.
President
no, that's not
yet another major
Donald
black
Trump
swan.
We say that, of course, on the part of China, we should refrain from exporting more steels, because for the year 2015, we exported over 120 million tons of steel to the world. Really, that's it's a big rise over the past few years. So that might cause some problems. On the other hand, then if we take the United States, for example, sorry, not for European Union, we say that we look at the cases. Are they measuring the case correctly? No, I doubt. For instance, in late April this year, the U.S. Department of Commerce ruled out that China's cold-rolled steel sheet just had subsidies and dumped, and they charged over 522% charge combined, anti-dumping and the countervailing combined. So if we just compute back, then the Chinese export price to the U.S. should be over $3,000 per ton. That's nothing to do with the U.S. production cost, nothing to do with the competition in the U.S. Just absurd. So I think they are also working, performing in the wrong way. We have to work in the two ways.
You mean?
Try to cooperate a dialogue, and I think the most effective way is we can take the photovoltaic for example. Then we can sit together to find out what is the right size of the market, how we can cooperate, the sector's cooperation for win-win. Now that would be the better solution.
And do you believe WTO dispute settlement mechanism will authorize the Chinese parties to take legal action? And do you think we should have the confidence to have that job done? Many Chinese who are following this process of your denials are not sure about the role of the WTO. After all, it's a mechanism that helps settle the disputes.
I think you've got two options: litigate or just be great. You know, you can spend time and energy in litigation, and you know, all that negative energy can wear you out a bit. Or you can just be great, you know, just continue to develop, just continue to create industries, new brands, just continue to be Huawei, Lenovo, Alibaba. Just if you're attractive, people want to join you.
We have been using the negative criticism, all criticisms are negative, positively to drive our modernization and force us to reform our SOE and to pay more respect to the IP. So instead of fighting back using legal measures, we should reflect upon what went wrong with our own behavior. In fact, I emphasized this from the beginning of our interview. Let's use the reluctance of Europeans and Americans as a very good opportunity. Because in Chinese we have 危机, dangers and opportunities.
Danger,
right?
make money in danger.
Right, this is an opportunity for China to further reform the SOE or whatever that may have gone wrong allegedly.
Absolutely. I think we can turn some unfavorable factors to good results if we work in the right way. First, I think we should listen carefully to what they say regarding China's problems in the opening the market access or in the opening reforms. And if that's really the case, we should do a good job at home. We should continuously push on reform, deepening reforms and opening. That's point one. And because that will be good for China, not only for the Europeans and Americans. And second, when we fight trade disputes, we can always find chances. Chances for cooperation, for mutual investment. And I think we have plenty of cases in the past. Why not we try in a positive way? If so, we can not only cover the negative effects to a certain extent, but also open new opportunities. That would be good.
What you said reminds me of the allegation of a former senior Chinese government official. Way ahead of our entry into the WTO, he said, if you want to dance with the wolves, you have to howl like a wolf. And that's a vivid illustration of how China should further integrate itself with the rest of the world. Many in the media were so skeptical about the impact upon China's homegrown industries in the first few days of our being admitted to the WTO. In fact, what happened was China emerged stronger in terms of trade and investment. Look at this fact. We have become the biggest trading partner, trading nation in the world. But thank you for your participation in this dialogue about why China has been denied fully fledged market economic status by Europeans and Americans. I believe such dialogue, such discussions will continue to think what we could do next. Until then, goodbye.